Hello. In this video I will interpret, I will first analyze and then interpret the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by Thomas Sterne Eliot. To this we have made a video which I also will analyze and talk about while I analyze the main text. I will roughly start with the lyrical eye and the narrator of the poem, then move on to the tone and mood in relation to the language. I'll take these two in one big bit. Afterwards I will then look upon the set. I will then look at the setting and the imagery used by the author, and then at last summarize the modernist traits. So if we start by looking at the first part of the video.
Nor was I meant to be. Am an intendant lord, one that will do, to swell our progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt an easy tool, differential, glad to be used, politic, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence but a bit obtuse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times a fool.
So if we start by looking at the narrator, we see it's an autodiegetic narrator, which means that the narrator is our main protagonist. It's also a narrator with internal focalization, which means that all of the things that we learn about the text we get from the narrator. The focus of perception of the text is on the main character here. This is very typical of the poem genre, and it makes it very personal and makes it very mood based, which of course is very good when you're writing a poem. If we then look at the lyrical eye of the text, whom we safely can assume is the person of J. Alfred Prufrock, we see it here that he believes he is insignificant, simplified by him turning down being Prince Hamlet, and in fact insisting that he is less than that. He is not worthy of being a protagonist, he is only worthy of being a side character. He degrades himself until he then becomes the fool, and to symbolize this degradation, we have in the video first had our actor wear some nice clothes and then wear some poorer looking clothes, and also then we take out a knife without an edge, which is of course a tool, but it's a tool without use, since its primary function to cut has been eliminated. And this is kind of how Prufrock views himself, as a tool, but not even a very good tool. And of course, in the end, when Prufrock calls himself a fool, we have had our actor don the infamous red clown nose. If we take a look at the language and the tone mood used here, we see that the language has a lot of adjectives and nouns and not so many verbs. This plays into the plot. The plot of the text is one of the mind. It's all happening in Prufrock's mind, and as we'll see later, it's just Prufrock thinking and talking with himself. And by having a lot of adjectives and nouns and not so many verbs, we get this idea that nothing happens and the plot becomes static. This also plays into the modernist trait of procrastination, which we see throughout the poem, with the lyrical eye procrastinating on pretty much everything. The language is also colloquial, which is the language of thought, which further plays into this idea of the thinking plot. And the mood of the poem, also with this thinkingness and a lot of adjectives and verbs, the tone becomes very static and the mood becomes very moody, with lack of a better word. It becomes very dark and black, but also just boring and meaningless. if we continue with the video.
I grow old, I shall wear the buttons of my trousers rolled. Shall I pare my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach.
If we quickly touches upon the lyrical eye here, we see that Prufrock is in this part continuing to procrastinate, and while not doing anything, he thinks and asks a lot of questions, but he never answers any of them. Instead, he just ponders on them, but doesn't arrive at any conclusion. In this part of the text, we also have Prufrock talking about himself, with which we in the video have symbolized by our actor being portrayed through a mirror. Of course, we also have our actor pull up a peach in the classic Hamlet fashion with the skull of Yorick, and this is to symbolize how Prufrock presents this, to be honest, insignificant question as a great existential crisis for him. If we then continue with the video.
I do not think they will sing of me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blow back. When the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by seagulls wedged with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us, then we drown.
Okay, so now the video is done, and for this last part of the video we have our first imagery of the text. It is a personification of nature, of the sea, in fact of the waves being combed by mermaids. If we talk a little bit more about the mermaids, we see that we see the idea of solipsism actually arriving from them, since Prufrock is unable to communicate with them since they don't want to sing to him. This is also a degradation of himself, since he is not worthy of being a lured by these mermaids. This personification of nature, if we go back to that, is of course a very romantic idea to personify nature, and we also see that Prufrock actually in the end of this poem has an epiphany, another very romantic idea, but it becomes kind of an anti-epiphany, since instead of through nature him realizing some profound knowledge, he instead just drowns in nature, in the sea. This also plays into the idea of anti-climaxes, which in this poem is very much used, and also creates this and also plays into this theme of insignificance, since nothing is worthy of a proper good climax. If we look upon the themes of the poem and try to sum them up, they can shortly be summed up as the tragedy of modern man. Throughout this text, there's a lot of tragic elements, which draws perspectives to the Greek tragedies, but instead of being cathartic and offering the audience some sort of profound experience, it's just Prufrock wallowing in his own self-doubt and self-criticism. Prufrock through very modern problems of solipsism and procrastination and knowledge of his own insignificance and nihilism, kind of drowns in his own thoughts, which we so clearly can see in the end, and becomes unable to do anything. Yes, that was my video. Thank you very much for listening.